a technology issue. This has happened before.
Live.
It just says live.
Oh, wait a second. It looks like it's moving now.
It says live on YouTube on our screens.
Yeah, yeah, it's moving now. Okay.
Live?
Yeah.
Okay, so Commissioner Baldwin is coming in right now. And now that we're on YouTube, we did have some difficulties, the live streaming on YouTube. And so, Mayor, when you are ready, you can go ahead and start the meeting. I know Commissioner Baldwin is connecting right now.
Very good. I call this budget hearing workshop for Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 to order. Will clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Richard Boss. Mayor Pro Tem Nadia Sykes.
Here.
Commissioner Sharon McDonald.
Here.
Commissioner Josh Reardon.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Payne. Commissioner Dusty Wright.
Here.
Commissioner Jason Baldwin.
Present.
City Manager Brian Caesar.
Here.
City Attorney Patria Bengoshe.
Here.
The clerk is present. Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll move on to the invocation, which will be given tonight by Commissioner McDonald. And if everyone will stand for that, and remain standing, please, for the pledge of allegiance, which will be led by Commissioner Long.
As we bow our heads, God, we thank you for today. We thank you for our lives at this present moment. We ask that you be in the midst of this meeting on tonight. We want to thank you for the staff that has prepared all of the information to present to us. And thank you for the leadership on tonight. We thank you for the commissioners and all the people that are present tonight. And we're just praying for a great meeting and to end quickly. Thank you. In these and other blessings we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Open the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the
To
flag
the flag of the United States of America.
and to the hands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as stated? I have a motion from Commissioner Reardon to approve the agenda. Do I have a second? I have a second from Commissioner Payne. For all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. We'll move on to presentations. Finance will present the primary fiscal year 22 City of Alamogordo budget. We have Ellen Huff, our finance director, here with us for that. Give information this evening. Ellen, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioner, City Manager. I come before you tonight with the presentation of the preliminary FY22 budget. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can see the PowerPoint presentation that we prepared for y'all. All right. It's hard to believe that 1 year ago, this was actually one of our first Zoom meetings, was our public hearings on the budget. And so it's kind of amazing that we're here again. So tonight I have the FY22 public budget hearings. We have City Manager Brian Caesar, myself, Kim Torres, the Deputy Human Resources Director, and assisting here is Maurice Gutierrez, the Budget Analyst. Our agenda for this evening is the City Manager is going to give his brief introduction. We're going to talk about the timeline for the budget, an overview of all the funds, a budget overview per fund type. We're going to talk about our gross receipts tax and how we have projected it for this fiscal year and further. Kim will present our personnel budget. And we'll talk about the approved capital. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to City Manager Brian Caesar for any introduction that he wants to give.
Right. Thank you, Evelyn. As Evelyn said, this is 1 year since we first tried this Zoom approach. Hopefully it goes a little smoother tonight than it did last year. It is a lot more of an optimistic budget, although still conservative. One thing that for you commissioners that have been here for a number of years or served for a number of years, what you're going to see as we go through the budget presentation and then on to the proposed capital and personnel requests, this is going to be a little bit different than you're probably used to seeing, taking more of a focus on some of the areas that have been traditionally, I don't want to say neglected, but put to the rear of the budget process. If there was a little bit of money left over, then we might have proposed a little something going in the direction of primarily community services, fire services, some of these other areas. And with that, I will turn it over back to you, Evelyn, correct?
Correct. Thank you, City Manager. So our budget adoption timeline is very similar to what we usually have. We have the budget public hearings with the commission tonight and then tomorrow and Thursday night if necessary. Once that is completed, if there are not any major changes, we would like to take this to the commission on May 11th for approval. If that's not possible, then we would take it on May 25th. The preliminary budget is due to DFA no later than June 1st. From there, we do our year-end close of FY21, which is closing our cash balances, reconciling everything like that, doing a true up for the salaries and benefits and any carryovers of capital or grants that need to happen. So we will bring that to the City Commission along with the final budget on July 27th of 2021. And that information is due to DFA no later than July 1st, 2021. The nice part about that is July 31st, 2021. The nice part about that is they are still using their LGBMS system, their electronic system. So we're talking about doing electronic upload of things. We don't have anything that has to be mailed or overnighted or anything like that. So this is our timeline that we're looking to follow for the rest of the budget process. Okay, our budget overview, all funds combined. This is about the highest level look that we could have at the budget at this point. We are showing our FY21 projections and our FY22 proposed, and then the difference in between those two. Our beginning fund balance for FY21, that is what our starting cash was as of July 1st of this fiscal year, so 66.5 million. Our projected revenues, our projected transfers in and out, and our projected expenditures. That would leave us with a net revenue of minus 20,000 or 20.9 million, giving us a projected ending fund balance, all funds combined, of 45.5 million. Our reserve requirement for FY21 right now is at 5.3 million, leaving us with an adjusted estimated ending fund balance of 40.1 million. So again, all of this revenues, transfers, expenditures, this is all what is currently projected to be budgeted for our current year, so through the end of June. And then for our FY21 proposed, we would go ahead, we have a little bit of difference here, which I'll explain those when we get to the fund types. But we would start with $45.4 million. We're estimating $53 million of revenue, $18.8 million of transfers, $61.2 million of expenditures, and at this point, $2 million in reserves. So as you can see, the differences are kind of on the side here. Several of those differences, especially in the revenues and the expenditures, come from our large capital projects that are currently budgeted in FY21, but will carry over to FY22. For example, Bonita Lake itself, that project has a $5 million revenue budget that is sitting in FY21. Whatever is not realized in FY21 will carry over. And the same thing down here in the expenditures, that same project has a $10 million budget expense number that is sitting in FY21 right now, obviously a good portion of that is going to transfer over to FY22. So that's where some of our major differences is. We'll talk about some of the other differences when we talk about the individual fund types. Was there any questions on the all funds combined overview? Okay. So now we're going to talk about our revenues, our revenue assumptions for FY22. We used our 3-year average, no increase assumed. This is something we'll talk about a little bit further in the presentation. We have a lot more information on our GRT, where it is, where it's been, where we think it's going. The property tax, we use the DFA formula that's required and assumed a 95% collection rate. The county's been anywhere in between 95 and 97%. We didn't project any growth in our franchise fees. And we also allowed each of the departments to project their charges for service, as they're the ones that kind of know where they're going with that, if they're open, how open they might be. Investment income is based on the current earnings and the amount of investments that we've kept and that we're planning on going forward. And then, of course, our grants are based completely on the agreements that we have in hand. Something that is not included in this budget on the grants is the money that we will be receiving from the ARP, the most recent stimulus package that was passed by the federal government. We do know that we will be receiving money from that, but since we do not have an in-hand signed agreement, it is not included until we have that. We know how much we're receiving and what it can be used for. Okay, so looking at the revenues overall, this is again our FY21 projected and our FY22 proposed. As you can see, there are some differences. The taxes, again, we'll talk more about that later. Fees and permits, we've kept pretty much the same. User fees, FY22, we've been a little cautious. We're still not 100% sure what's going to happen. So some of the departments didn't want to bump those up real high. The fines, we are hoping for a rebound of municipal court, that they're going to be able to be open more and have more opportunity. So that's the major driver for the fines. And then, of course, like we talked about with the grants, there are large numbers that are in FY21. If those are not realized in FY21, their budgets will carry over to FY22. We did a major reprojection of the investment income. We actually just decreased this number from what the original budget for FY21 was. Maurice worked really hard on some projections for that to try and get it closer to the rates that we were seeing and also in line with what we were keeping in our cash balances versus our investment balances. There's a possibility in FY22 and towards the end of FY21 that we're going to see an increase there because we just did move quite a bit of money over into the investments because things are a little bit more stable now and we felt more comfortable not being quite as liquid. Is there any questions on the revenues at this high level right now? Okay, so this is just a chart that shows kind of where our major revenues are and how they've moved. This is the 20 actuals, the 21 adjusted, and the FY22 proposed. As you can see, there's not a ton of movement. There's not a lot of movement on property taxes, gross receipt taxes, or user fees at this point. Okay, expenditures. The city manager's instructions to the departments in terms of expenditures was for the FY21 budget to keep it flat, no increases without a corresponding decrease. That was also his same instructions to the departments for the FY22 budget. However, he did tell them on the FY22 budget for the city manager director meetings, if they wanted to request an increase in a line or a new piece of capital, a new position, anything like that, to bring that along with justification to the city manager director meetings. So you will see there will be some lines that did, some categories of lines that did have increases, and that is due to requests from the departments, or it's also due to departments bringing their budgets back to where they were prior to cutting them for COVID, because certain services were not going to be able to be provided to the city or by the city. Okay, so expenditures, again, another high level look at it. We have our FY21 projected and our FY22 proposed. As you can see, we are showing an increase in salaries and benefits. It's not as large as you would quite expect at this point, due to the fact that we are putting in the 50 cents increase on July 1st and the 50 cents increase on January 1st. Part of that comes from, there are some vacancy losses that have been captured in the FY21 projected, not all of them, but some of them. The other thing too is because we have so many vacant positions, those positions currently right now are budgeted at their starting rate. So we have all of our vacancies are budgeted as if people were coming in without any new experience, without having been at the city already or anything like that. So that's how they're entered in the system. So those two kind of offset the increase from July 1st and January 1st. Other services, one of the reasons that we're seeing that increase there in other services and some of these corresponding decreases is other services was a line where a lot of our COVID expenses were taken out of. So we might have moved money from travel to buy supplies or to do maintenance or to do other expense for some of those COVID issues. And so what we're doing in FY22 is we're moving that money back out of where it was moved for FY21 back into other services where it originally was budgeted and where it originally lived. Insurance premiums, as you can see, there's an increase here. This is kind of a twofold situation. One, several of our insurance carriers for FY21 gave us a 50% discount for FY21 due to the COVID situation. We are not expecting that this year. The other thing here is we have had to increase some of our insurance lines to plan for the increased liability insurance that the police department is going to need to carry, not only for itself, but also individually for its officers. So that has been included in the budget as well. And then as you can see, the decrease in capital outlay again comes from the capital projects that are budgeted in FY21 that need to either carry over. So this amount that's here in FY22 right now is the new capital that was approved during the budget meetings and also the capital that has been awarded to the city by the state legislature. Okay, any questions on the big picture expenditures? Okay, so this is our annual pie chart that shows the breakdown of what our expenditure budget categories fall into. As usual, our salaries and benefits is the biggest chunk of this. It's at 37% this year. Last year it was at 40%, so it's gone down a little bit, not too much. As you can see, other services, which we always know is a big category, encompasses a lot of different things. Capital outlay has also been a larger portion for our budget this year than it has been certainly in the past couple of years. And so then we have some of our other things. As always, debt service is completely driven by the debt schedules that we're provided with when we take out that debt. Okay, expenditures by category. So as you can see, this is the overall picture of all the expenditures for the city and for all the funds. And as you can see, for the most part, they've stayed pretty level. There are small increases across salaries and benefits, some in the other services, which we kind of already talked about. And then also the capital outlay. So this is just kind of another way of showing the chart that we showed earlier. Okay, we're going to go now into the budget overview per fund type. We're going to drill down a little bit more into the individual funds. For your summary books, these are going to go in the same order that your summary books go in. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. We're going to start, of course, with our main fund, our general fund. So as you can see, it's one fund. However, it's broken up into the several different departments. Most of these are the nucleus for the city. And so it's got a couple of pages on that. This is our recap for the general fund. So as you can see, for FY21, we began the year with $10.8 million in beginning cash balance. These are our estimated budget numbers for the rest of FY21. So we're estimating at the end of FY21, we're going to come with a ending cash balance of 9.6 million. Currently, our reserves for the general fund are 1.6 million. This is the 1/12 that is required by DFA, plus 1/12 of all of the subsidies that are provided to the individual funds that are subsidized by the general fund. So that'll give us an adjusted ending cash balance of $7.9 million. For FY22, our beginning cash then will be 9.6 million. We have our estimated revenues, transfers, our expenditures, and so we're looking at an estimated ending cash balance of 3.3 million. Our reserve would be 1.926 million. And so that would leave us with an adjusted ending cash of 1.4 million. Obviously, this is a better position than we have been able to kind of report to you guys in the past. We've been working hard on that to make sure that we are in a position where we have enough cash balance that we can operate, and yet we're not living really close to the bone and always being concerned about every expenditure. Okay, so this is our revenue by category for the general fund. So as you can see, taxes continue to be the large money-making opportunity for the general fund. These taxes include the gross receipts tax and also any property tax that are into the general fund, along obviously with the state shared fees. These are the two large amounts that we get every month from TRD. And again, we have more slides about the gross receipts tax a little further in. They make kind of everything else look small in comparison. So we are hoping that, and we're planning that our revenue, especially our fine revenue, is going to rebound a little bit more for FY22. But for the most part, we're planning that most of our revenue is going to stay pretty flat, pretty similar to what we had been getting. If you'll notice, the general fund for FY21 has a small bar here. You're going to see that on several of the different funds. What this is this is the money that we receive from the CARES Act. We receive money through DFA, and that money was allotted to the different funds to help offset the administrative leave that was paid to the employees for them to be able to not come to work and be able to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So we applied for that through DFA. We were awarded $480,000, and that has been distributed throughout the funds based on the backup documentation that we gave to DFA. Okay, is there any questions on the revenue for the general fund? Okay. So we're going to talk about the transfers in and the transfers out for the general fund. If you'll notice, the transfers in for the general fund have quite a bit of an increase over what we have seen in the past. This is because we have several projects that we are doing for PD and fire that are being paid out of the general fund, but they are actually being funded by Fund 69, which is a gross receipts tax fund that has a specific description on it that it can be used for the upgrade of public safety buildings. So we are making use of some of the funds in 69 to be able to pay for those upgrades for PD and for fire. So you'll notice the transfer outs, again, they look like they are increasing, but you do remember on the funds that are subsidized by the general fund, this will see a decrease because we do not transfer more than what is required. So we don't just do a flat transfer every month and they get it whether they need it or not. We only transfer the subsidies when it's actually needed. The other thing that is causing a little bit of increase in FY22, and we'll see this when we get to the capital sides, but there are several different funds that are having capital that is being paid for out of the general fund. And so we'll highlight those when we get to the capital sides. So that is one of the reasons that you're seeing an increase here. And we expect this transfer out for FY21 will come a little bit closer to the mean, a little bit closer to what FY20 is currently. Okay, general fund expenditures by category. As you can see, salaries and benefit continues to be the driver for the general fund. There's a lot of the parts of the general fund that are completely driven by the salaries and benefits. Other services are down here. As you can see, they've had an increase. And again, part of that is stuff moving around for COVID. Part of that is stuff moving back for COVID. Same thing with the insurance premiums. We talked about that already, where we're going to see the increases there. A lot of that insurance that I talked about is paid for out of the general fund, either in the non-departmental part or in the individual PD and fire and different things like that. So we got a break in FY21 because of the insurers bringing that amount, but FY22 we expect it to go back up, plus some additional coverage that we need to carry. As you can see, for FY22, the capital outlay is seeing a very large increase. There's a couple different reasons for that. One we'll talk about more in the presentation is the capital that was put out for the technology upgrades, which, like I said, we have some specific slides to talk about that. And then there are some other upgrades and things that are included in that. And there's a full detailed list in your book. And then we'll also talk about it when we get to the capital slides. But obviously, the biggest driver here, since this is about, $350,000, a huge driver is going to be the $2.5 million for the technology upgrade. Is there any questions on expenditures by category or the transfers in and out for the general fund? Okay. We do want to include a note on GRIP. The expenses presented here for the general fund include $100,000 in the GRIP line. This is to cover any final GRIP request made by the Home 2 project, which is our final GRIP project that is has a current contract. They have submitted a lot of paperwork. They've submitted a lot of receipts. We've been working with them to get through the receipts and make sure that everything is verified and everything like that. We're hoping to be able to make that payment in the FY21 fiscal year, but we did include this money just in case we can't get everything done and we end up having to make it in the FY22 fiscal year. There are no further GRIP expenses that are budgeted in this budget. Okay, general fund expense by department. This is a favorite slide of mine every year, and as you can see, the police are still winning. They are still the highest amount of expenditures that we have in the general fund. And some notes on what they've got going on here. One, this year we did not subtract out their vacancy savings when we did their reprojected FY21 budget. So while this looks super high compared to this, we did not cut PD's operating budget in FY20, and we didn't super increase it in FY21. This just has a lot of vacancy savings that's going to be here as well. The other thing that's showing up here for the FY22 is they were awarded $200,000 in capital for the Oregon school to do the upgrades and things that need to be done to that. So some of the evidence can be moved over there. And this again is budgeted as if all of their positions would be filled for FY22. So that's why that's showing a pretty large number. The other thing that I do need to point out in both the police and the fire, this budget does not include any ramifications for the new APSOA contract, which is going to be put in front of you at your next commission meeting next week. So this is budgeted at the current contract. Obviously, if that contract is approved by you all next week, then we will, when we roll the personnel budget for the final time at the very end of June, that will be taken into account and it will be brought to you during the final budget process like we do in July. Again, non-departmental, as you can see, it has a very large increase here. That very large increase is due to the $2.5 million in technology upgrades for the capital that is included in the non-departmental. The other thing I want to highlight is, as you can see, fire has a small increase here. They are one of the departments that were approved for new positions. So those new positions are included in this budget. Everything else, as you can see, has pretty much stayed level or has had a small increase throughout the year. Is there any questions about expenses by department, this particular chart?
Well, I got a quick question. It's in the legislative branch, on page 7 in our deal, but why is the salaries and benefits for the commission part of it going down almost 10,000?
So there was still some residual stuff that was in the FY21 budget from when everything switched over and there was those differences. We think we have that all cleared up now, and so it should be straightforward as to what you guys are making, and there's nothing left over from commissioners leaving or from the terms changing.
Okay, and then I had a quick question on your description up here. It says that commissioners are paid $500 per month, mayor is paid $800 per month. If I remember correctly, we have $500 per commissioner and then $100 for the charter per commissioner, and then $750 to the mayor and an additional $100 for the charter. Do we have that budgeted correctly, or?
So the mayor receives almost $800 per meeting. I looked that one up. I'd have to look exactly what the commissioners, let's see, Maurice can give me the thing here. It's 1101.
If I remember correctly, when the ordinance was passed for the pay or the compensation, it was $500 for a regular commissioner and then $750 for the mayor. Plus we got the additional for the charter, $100 or $50 per regular meeting. I want to make sure we got that budgeted correctly because it's wrong right here. It's got 500 and 800.
Right now, what is entered in HTE for each commissioner is $6,000 a year.
Okay.
That is what is entered. That's how HTE sees it. And then for the mayor, it's entered at $9,000 a year.
About, because per our charter, and it's still in there, it says that we're supposed to be paid $50 per regular meeting.
Yeah, 6,000.
So it should be $7,200 per commissioner, and whatever the difference is for the mayor, $750 a month, and then the $100. How the ordinance was written when it was originally passed, I don't know if it's been changed in the last 4 years. $850 for him and
So much per commission meeting.
that's
There was an extra amount added to that.
that's
$100 a month plus $50 for every meeting. you attend.
yeah, for the 2 regular meetings.
Right.
So I just want to make sure we're budgeted correctly, because the information you have here is I think incorrect.
How many commission meetings do we have a year?
There's 2.
There's not
yeah,
always
there's
2 a month. Is there 2 a month?
Sometimes there's 3, so.
So
We'll verify that, and if it needs to be changed, we'll make sure that is brought up at the next commission meeting or when this budget is approved.
I remember that ordinance voted on.
Now,
when it passed.
Commissioner Reardon's right, it's $500 a month plus $50 for every meeting you attend.
Regular meetings.
Every
The 2
regular meeting you attend,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's per the charter, so it's $600 a month per commissioner and then $750 plus $100 for the mayor. What it should be.
okay, we'll look into that, how that is in HTE. It might also have a riser on it that doesn't show up on this report. So we'll have to look into that.
Thank you. And then another quick one on the executive city manager's deal, we got a $6,600 increase. Is that due to the minimum wage increase on Brian's salary?
So yes, so the 50 cents is that in those salary and benefit lines, that's the city manager, the assistant city manager, the executive assistant, and a portion of the communication and marketing assistant and the communication and public info officer.
So that's just the difference, the increase due to the minimum wage increase?
Correct. Okay, any other questions? All right. So as you can see this chart next, this is our revenues versus expenditures for the general fund. And so this shows, as you can see, for our FY20 actuals, our projected, and our FY22 proposed, our revenues are exceeding our expenditures for that general fund. Again, this is a good thing, especially because this chart here does not take into account the transfers out. So a lot of this additional revenue that is realized by the general fund is transferred out to the other funds so that they can be subsidized and they can continue to operate, especially for those funds that are not able to cover their expenditures with the revenue that they make. Okay, any additional questions on the general fund at this time? Okay. Internal services. So again, this is one of the fund types that only has one fund, Fund 12. That fund is broken up into several different departments. So for the internal service fund, our beginning cash balance is $75,354 for FY21, which with our projections leaves our estimated ending cash balance of $167,215. However, if you'll notice down here for FY21 or FY22, we put down for our estimated beginning cash balance for this zero. The reason that we do this is because this is an internal service fund and it is funded so heavily by transfers in from other funds. At the end of the fiscal year in June, we go back through and we look at the actual expenditures and the actual revenues by the internal service funds, and we do a reconciliation. And so that transfer that we make in the last period of the year is not a flat allocation. It is really dependent on how much the internal service funds have actually spent. And so we don't want to transfer more out of the other funds than we absolutely have to, because we don't want to grow the ending cash balance of this particular fund. So for our estimated beginning cash balance, we do start with zero. We have our estimated revenues, our transfers in, and our expenditures. You'll notice there's no transfers out for this fiscal year for FY12, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. Okay, internal services revenue by category. Internal services don't generate a whole bunch of revenue, just by the nature of the fact that they mostly serve the departments of the city of Alamogordo and don't have a lot of service outside of the city. There is some miscellaneous revenue. A good portion of that has to do with the cell phone tower leases that the facility maintenance department gets. Other miscellaneous revenue in here is fees that the enterprise funds pay to the internal services, and then also any sort of sales scrap, which is really small. The majority of this is the leases of the cell phone towers and the enterprise funds. And again, they have a small grant column for FY21, which is the CARES Act money. Okay, transfers in and out. As you can see, the transfers in are a huge portion of the internal service fund. And again, they are reconciled at the last period of every fiscal year to determine where and when the expenditures have been spent, and if we need to transfer any more funds or if we need to return funds to departments. There's not a transfer out this year for internal services because normally they transfer some funds out to the self-insured fund for our liabilities and deductibles. That fund currently has a more than adequate fund balance going forward. So none of the departments are going to be transferring to 107 this year. We don't need to grow that fund balance at this point, and we'll revisit that each year as we see fit. Okay, expenditures by category. As usual, internal services is driven very much by the salaries and benefits. The other services sees a large increase, and that's partially to a couple different reasons. One, several of the budget lines in HR were decreased substantially in FY21 due to the pandemic. There was just a lot of stuff that they couldn't do in terms of employee appreciation, some of the physical, some of the scouting and everything that they usually do. So that was decreased for FY salary study. And so that is going to run about $40,000. So that is here. And then the other large increase in other services that we see in internal services comes from the MIS department and several of the things that we're doing with our IT services, including some outsourcing and some bringing in certified Microsoft engineers to help with some of our networking. And so that is all realized in other services in the MIS department. So expense by department. So as you can see, they've been pretty similar. These increase in HR is kind of what we were talking about several of their budgets that were cut for FY21 being restored to them. Facility maintenance had several things that were approved for them that aren't necessarily large capital systems, and some contingency things so that Paul can do some more of his building upkeep that he's been asking for. And then as you can see, MIS has seen a large increase here for FY21 and then also for FY22. Again, that goes hand in hand with the IT contracts that we've been working on and also some of the capital that they've been approved, including a new switch, since our current switch is about to end of life here pretty shortly. So we need to get that replaced before it replaces itself. And then in fleet maintenance, they had a small increase because they were awarded some capital that they had not been awarded in the past. So is there any question on internal services, expenditures, revenues, transfers, any questions in general on that? Okay. So this is internal revenue, internal services, revenues, and expenditures. As you can see, we didn't include the transfers this year, so it became very obvious that internal services are not going to be able to support themselves with the revenues they generate. The expenditures are definitely going to outstrip that. And so it's very important those transfers in and those subsidies from the other funds are definitely what makes the internal services kind of go around and around. Okay, any questions on internal services? Okay. Special revenue. So this is our big, very varied type of funds. So we have everything from our lodgers tax funds to our municipal court. Our largest part of this is our community services. Our cemetery is also here, down to our fire protection, our small little things that are our HIDA grants, our law enforcement. We have a couple of gross receipts tax funds that are here, our transportation, which is our streets, our weeds and drainage, our senior center is here, and some of our other gross receipts tax and our self-insures. So there's a lot going on in this one. So as you can see, this is our first fund that kind of gets into more with the subsidies. Every line here that's highlighted in yellow is a fund that is subsidized by the general fund, except at this point for Fund 20. Initially for fiscal year 21, Fund 20 was projected to need a transfer in from the general fund. When we came back and had our city manager director meetings, we were able to look at kind of what they brought in, what they've spent. They've been very frugal while they've been closed. And so they no longer need that transfer in from the general fund. So we removed that for FY21. But these other funds that we subsidize are still requiring subsidies for fiscal year 21. And for fiscal year 22, as you can see, we were again able to leave off the subsidy for Fund 20. Hopefully when we come back in the middle of the year and we project everything, that will still be accurate. We are needing to subsidize the other funds that we normally do. Okay, special revenue by category. As you can see here, because of several of those funds that are the GRT funds that have those allocations that go directly into them, they are definitely, taxes are a big part of what goes into special revenue. And then they do receive a small part of state shared fees for Fund 44 for some of the gasoline tax income that they receive and some of the licensing that they receive. User fees are driven by the rec center, the civic center are the big driver for the user fees. And then as you can see, these funds also have grants and some of them have investment incomes as well. Okay, the transfers in and out for special revenue. As you can see, the transfers in, we do show them increasing. Again, this is going to be because of the funds that receive subsidies. This is going to be adjusted when we get to that final period and see what we need to transfer and what we don't need to transfer. The transfer outs look a little bit different this year. They're obviously larger in FY21 because they include transfer outs to projects that won't be completed and will need to be carried over. For FY22, they look higher than they normally do because several of the GRT funds, we are using funds to transfer out to fund some of our capital projects, which when we talk about the capital listing, also the capital listing in your book, it is detailed as to which of those projects is being funded by which part. Okay, expenditures by category. Salaries and benefits obviously are a big driver here as well. We kind of have some things that are going up and down. A lot of these funds were hit by COVID, excuse me. And so they moved a lot of things around, either into lines or out of lines. And so all of these managers and directors have spent quite a bit of time kind of getting their FY22 budgets back a little bit level where they want to be able to spend things now that hopefully FY22 is a little bit more normal than FY21 was. And as you can see, the capital number here is much higher than it has been. And this is very similar to what Brian was talking about. Several of these funds have not received a great deal of capital in the past, especially 32, 44. And so this year, there's been more focus on getting that capital in there and getting that capital approved to 32 and 44 so that we can make up with some of the issues that they've been facing. So that's one of the reasons you're seeing such a large capital increase there. Okay, special revenue expense by department. So as you can see, yep, go ahead.
Or whenever we get there, but like in Fund 32, on the parks with the capital improvement, what kind of projects are we looking at doing with that?
So for Fund 32 for their capital, they are the biggest one that is driving a lot of that is there's $753,000 budgeted for the Alamogordo or the Alameda Park irrigation and renovations of that. Parks themselves is also receiving quite a bit of equipment so that they can increase their capacity with their trucks and their dump trailers. The zoo is receiving $75,000 to repair certain exhibits, to replace some of their infrastructure that they need to. There's some renovations that need to be done to the splash park at the rec center. So they're receiving $40,000. They're also receiving a new vehicle. So in total, the amount of capital that is included in this budget for Fund 32 is $1,222,791.
Okay. That'll work.
So obviously that's the large increase here. Transportation is a little bit interesting, because it's showing flat. However, FY21 has the Griggs Detention Basin project in it, which was a large amount of capital. That project has been completed. So there is some more capital in there for the Dry Canyon evaluations and improvements that most likely will carry over to FY22. So it kind of offsets the fact that 44 is also receiving close to $1 million in capital. So while it looks like it's staying the same, it's one large project finishing and some other projects being approved. So we kind of wanted to highlight that transportation looks a little different, but that's because of the large number that was on there for one particular project in FY21. Oops, sorry, let me go back here. And so really those are the biggest highlights on that. Everything else has been pretty much flat. I did want to highlight this lodger's tax, the city share. This is Fund 20. As you can see, Fund 20 had obviously a much higher actual in FY21 or in FY20 due to the fact that they could be a little bit more open, they could have events and everything. As you can see, it's decreased substantially for FY21, FY22. Part of that was an effort to get that fund on a little bit better financial footing, which it's in a lot better financial footing than it was when I first talked to you guys about it in FY19. And so it's also for FY22, we're still a little unsure about what type of events they're going to be able to have, but that's kind of where that change has gone there. Okay. Is there any questions about expense by department for special revenue? Okay, so we do have a note. We do have a note on RSVP. The Retired Senior Volunteer Program did not receive renewal of its federal funding. This funding is usually around $50,000. So due to the loss of the federal funding, the RSVP program also will not receive any state funding, which is about $46,000. So there were a lot of conversations with Ronnie and with Brian and with Stephanie and with the people, the state RSVP people. Some of the things that Ronnie was told was that the federal RSVP program is most likely going away. And so because of that, it was determined that this program should be discontinued. So the expenses that are included in this budget will cover its operations through September of 2021, because that is when the federal money is scheduled to quit. So we wanted to kind of highlight that's a difference in that RSVP fund that hadn't been there in the past. Okay, so this is special revenues versus expenditures. So as you can see, as we always work to do, we try and keep all of the funds in balance with their revenues and transfers in and their total expenditures and transfers out. Community services does have a little bit more expenditures than they do. They have some fund balance left over from FY21 that they're going to spend down. And part of that is to help fund that capital that we talked about earlier. Other than that, everything else for the most part is in balance. A couple of our GRT funds that we're doing a little bit more transferring out of because they have substantial fund balances. They are seeing more transfers out and more expenditures than they are seeing revenues. But all of those funds have good, healthy, substantial fund balances that they can do. So we're happy we're going to be using that, and we think it balances. Did want to point out on the liabilities and deductibles, That you'll notice they only have expenditures. This is what I was talking about before, that we're not doing any transfers into this fund, Fund 107, for fiscal year FY22 because of the healthy nature of its fund balance and the belief that we should be able to cover anything that comes our way with that current fund balance. But if we have to revisit that in the future, we can revisit that as well. Okay, any further questions at this point on special revenue?
Well, Glenn, I got one quick question. It's on page 78 of ours. It's that special revenue at ESGRT 089. You got a 40. Page 78. You got a 43.9% change in the other services. It's an $84,000 difference. What is that?
So that, let's see here.
Page 78 in our book. I'm not sure what it is in yours.
Yes, so that has to do with some of the post-closure reserve costs are included in there for not only the landfill, but also for the old Dog Canyon landfill. And so that's just an adjustment to make sure that we're covering that post-closure reserve cost.
I just think like a huge increase from 2020, it was 12,000, then we went to 192,000. Is that just for the closure of the cells out there at our current landfill?
Yeah, so
It's
we're
the reserve
required.
that sorry, go ahead, Evelyn.
Yeah, I'm sure just what you're saying. We are required to keep a certain amount there budgeted, but we don't usually end up spending the entire amount. So we budget it every year. Yeah, in FY20, the Dog Canyon payment was only the $12,136. There wasn't a payment that we had to make on the landfill. So we budget it at the full amount every year, but we don't have to use it.
This is part of the reason that we are anxious to get cells 1 and 2 closed at the regional landfill, because that brings these numbers down. These numbers for the post-closure, they're calculated by an outside engineering firm, approved by the state. This was one of the items that was brought forward at the annual landfill meeting.
Okay.
So as we move forward, we get cells 1 and 2 closed, these reserve costs will go down.
Thank you.
Okay. Nadia, you're on mute.
I do that on purpose so somebody could say you're on mute. I just can't get past the RSVP program. Over the years, Mayor Boss and I have actually attended the banquets. We've seen how excited the seniors are at the senior center with regard to the RSVP program. They add up their hours. They're very proud of volunteering for 20, 30 years. And I'm wondering, is there going to be something substituted for that program? Have you heard anything? Did we get any resistance from any of the RSVP people?
So I'm going to defer that to Stephanie Hernandez since Ronnie was unable to make it tonight. I know that she and Stephanie have had conversations on that. So Stephanie.
Can you hear me, Nadia?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So we are still working with them with the hopes that maybe there's a chance under the Biden administration. However, it's not looking good right now. We have reached out to say the hospital because I know that they have a lot of our volunteers to see if maybe they could pitch in. But however, we won't be able to call it the RSVP program. If for some reason it was to continue, that would have to be a completely different program. As of right now, we don't see that it's going to continue, and they haven't put anything out that it's going to under another name or another program at this moment. But we're still looking at it, and we are still keeping an eye on it.
It's just a sad program to see leaving. So, but thank you.
Okay, any other special revenue questions? Okay, so moving on. Capital. So capital includes our grant capital improvement fund, which is a big fund in that, along with some of our other large funds, including our Corps of Engineers project, what's left of our desal plant, some of our gross receipts tax, direct funds, including our economic development and our street capital, and some of our other funds that are tailing down towards the end of their time, our general obligation bond funds and our quality of life funds. So on that note, this is the recap for FY21 for those funds. Obviously, none of these funds are subsidized. A lot of these funds have transfers out to several other funds to fund projects, to fund capital and things like that. Kind of on a note here, which is a little bit different than we've seen for the past couple of years, is we do have a budget in our CDBG fund, since we do have a current active CDBG project. So for FY22, several of these funds will have carryovers, obviously, as they are grant capital and capital funds, especially our grant fund, which the majority of things that are not completed in that by the end of this fiscal year will carry over. Same thing with CDBG. Everything that is not completed by the end of this fiscal year will carry over for CDBG. So revenue by categories, obviously, there's two main drivers in these funds. It's either gross receipts tax or it's grants. There's really very little user fees or miscellaneous revenue or anything like that. The one thing that we are going to see, we won't see it in this fund. That'll be in the debt service. We'll talk about that in a little while. But these are the two main drivers, and these are, again, grants are not included until they're actually in hand, and then we'll talk more about our tax projections in the future. Capital are transfers in. Obviously, again, the transfers in is directly attached to capital projects. So as the projects carry on, so the transfers in roll forward. The majority of these transfers in right now are attached to the core project, as we're trying to get that winded down and get that finished out. The transfers out, several of these funds transfer out to several of the projects that are being transferred into. And then as we can see, the FY22 is kind of going to be a higher number than we normally have in a preliminary budget, because we do have, we do have several projects that we are funding with transfers in from these. Okay, expenditures by category. This probably shouldn't be a shocker to everybody, but the main expense in the capital funds is capital. So as you can see, some of these other little ones we have, most of these are tied to grants and projects that we have in 24. 24 has a variety, Fund 24, the Grant Improvement Fund, has a variety of different grants, all the way including the Petco grants that the animal control has, to the PD CIT grant lives in Fund 24, along with the big allocations that were given from the state. So there's a lot of different things that live in that Fund 24, but in the majority of the other ones, it's mostly capital. Okay, so this is the capital expense by department. So as you can see, we have a lot of really tall bars for FY21. A lot of these bars will either be completed in FY21 or carry over to FY22. We recently made a payment to the Army Corps of Engineers. It will actually post tomorrow, to try and pay out some of what they're finishing up. So hopefully, we're hoping FY22 will be kind of the end of that. That would be really nice. The Grant Capital Fund is the one I was talking about, Fund 24, that has a lot of different items in it. The CDBG project is the one that will carry over whatever's not complete in FY21. The bulk of that construction is going to be in FY22. And then street capital is our Fund 109. And that's always a big one. There's capital in there. And there's capital that they're given every single year. And then there's several projects that are sitting in there, including the scenic extension, some of the SMPs. There's just a lot of different stuff that is sitting in 109. And then there's some of the smaller funds that, like I said, are either close to being finished out, such as the quality of life, or some of the general obligation bond funds that we're looking at being able to close out in FY22. So is there any question on the capital expenses by department? Okay. So revenues versus expenditures. As you can see, we again try and keep these pretty close. This is revenues and expenditures, including the transfers in and the transfers out. Obviously, grant capital improvement, because that's so much grant funding, we work really, really hard to keep that even. As you can see, some of our gross receipts funds that are in here are seeing revenues that are exceeding the expenditures. One that I do need to highlight is the Economic Development Gross Receipts Tax Fund. That has a substantial cash balance, and it has a substantial income that is budgeted for it. And at this point, it really doesn't have a lot of expenditures out of it. So that's one that you're going to kind of see the cash balance go up on, because we really haven't made any payments out of here other than to our economic development contract. And so this is also, again, the street capital, we try and keep that as even as possible too. Are there any further questions on capital, the capital funds? Okay. So moving on, debt service. Debt service has 3 different funds. We have Fund 53, which takes care of our general obligation bonds. We have Fund 59, which is our gross receipts tax principal and interest, and covers these loans. And then we have our Fund 82, which is our water and sewer principal interest, which covers these funds. And we'll also be covering the debt service for the drinking water revolving fund that we just recently got. That is not included on this presentation, but you will be seeing it probably at the end of May on a revision, so that it's added to the FY21 budget. It'll be on the FY22 final budget as well. So the debt service is very straightforward in terms of the debt schedules tell us what we need to pay. And so that is what we budget. So as you can see, there's not a ton of difference from year to year. We're kind of in a cycle right now where everything's pretty established. And so there's not a bunch of big changes going forward for at least for FY22. So the debt service revenue by category, obviously the biggest revenue is the property taxes that go into Fund 53 that fund those general obligation bonds. The loan proceeds that we had from the refunding of our loan in FY20 is what's driving the loan proceeds. Again, that's going to start going up as we start doing draws on the new loan that we took out for the Bonita Lake Dam. Transfers in obviously are a big part of the debt service, as these are how we get the funds that are paying the debt service, such as 81 and some of our other ones. So those transfers in, again, are seen pretty flat because our debt is in a pretty solid place. And of course, our expenditures are principal and interest. We do have a little bit of fees on some of our loans, and every once in a while, especially when we do take out a new bond or we have a refinancing, we do have some bond and loan expense fees that we do have to pay. So, and then this kind of just breaks down the debt of where we're at in terms of our expense by This is the general obligation PI is Fund 53, the gross receipts tax is Fund 59, and the water and sewer is Fund 82. And that is the one that had the refunding in Fund 20 or in FY 20. So are there any questions on our debt service funds? Okay. So moving on to our enterprise funds. These are our operations that charge a lot more in terms of user fees and are more out there in the public. So as you can see for our FY21 recap, we do have 2 of these enterprise funds that currently receive a subsidy. The golf course receives a subsidy and the airport has a planned subsidy for FY21. At this point, it looks like we are not going to have to use that. It was originally planned because of some of the projects that he has going on. We were not 100% sure about how quickly the funding was going to come or switch out. That has changed in the last several months, especially the FAA. They've been sending a lot of money to local airports, and they've been really good about the reimbursements. So he most likely will not have to use that $100,000 transfer in, but we left it there in case something changes or we need to do something else with the airport. But other than that, these are the funds that do not require any subsidy from the general fund. Okay, enterprise fund. So obviously, since they're enterprise funds, they are driven a great deal by user fees. These user fees are really mostly made up of the water rates from Fund 81, the water and sewer, and from the rates that are charged out at the landfill. They're the 2 biggest drivers of the user fees, but this also includes the user fees from the rents at the housing authority and the money collected at the convenience center. So as you can see, it talks here about revenue, the grants. Obviously, the biggest driver for that is the grant from FEMA for Bonita Lake. So that all of that revenue right now is budgeted in FY21. Whatever we don't receive in FY21 will carry over to FY22. Transfers in and transfers out. Again, that transfers in is driven almost completely by the Bonita Lake project and the money that we're using to offset the expenditures in there that are not covered by the FEMA or for our local match that we need to cover. So that is a big part of the transfer in there. And then obviously the other transfers in include the subsidies or there is some transferring in between funds to cover certain capital projects. The transfers out are staying pretty steady. A lot of that is debt service or transfers out to internal services. Expenditures by category. This is one of the few groups where salaries and benefits is not the biggest thing. And again, partially that is because of the Bonita Lake project. In this capital outlay portion here, the Bonita Lake project takes up half of that $20 million. The other $10 million is broken up over different projects, including some capital that is in the water department, some capital that is in the landfill to replace some of the equipment there that was approved by the landfill board. So that is where the majority of those big projects lie. Other than that, everything else is staying relatively the same. There's small increase in salaries and benefits. The FY21 salary and benefit number is going to come back much closer to the FY20 actual number because there have been some significant vacancies in several of these enterprise departments throughout FY21. So once we remove that vacancy savings from there, it's going to come back pretty hard. And so as you can see, there's a little increase in the other services, but that's not pretty substantial. Most of that is, again, putting contracts back up to where they were prior to the COVID shutdowns and knowing that we needed to decrease them because we either weren't going to be able to take advantage of those services or we needed that money in other areas. Okay, enterprise expense by department. Obviously, the biggest department in this is going to be the water and sewer operating. As you can see, this is kind of indicative of having that big Bonita Lake project in there. We did not substantially cut the water and sewer operating budget for FY22. It just does not include that large amount for Bonita Lake. And the same thing for FY20 for the actuals has a large amount of the money that we spent on the actuals for Bonita Lake. So I don't want there to be any thought that we came in and we substantially cut water and sewage budget, because we did not. And kind of the same thing with the landfill. The landfill had some major capital replacements that they had to do in FY21, including their scraper. And so obviously that's not included in their FY22 proposals. Is there any questions on expenses for the enterprise funds? Okay, so we're going to talk about the revenues versus expenditures for the revenue, or for the enterprise funds. As you can see, several of them in this case are dipping into their fund balance. There's a couple of them that have revenues that are less than their expenditures, either because we're spending their fund balance on capital, or we have some increases in their operating that's spending their fund balance. But for the most part, for many of them, we try and keep them in balance. Several of these funds have some fund balance they can spend, several of them do not. So, you know, the ones that do have some fund balance, we're letting them use that a little bit. The ones that do not, we're trying to just keep them even. Any further questions on enterprise funds?
I got one. It's Fund 90. It's the golf course out there. We've got a 46.2% increase in our transfers in out there. Is that just due to COVID, due to loss of revenue out there for fees, or what is that for?
So two different things. That is their subsidy. So their subsidy did increase, but then also they are receiving some capital. And so they are receiving, oh, I went one page too far, that's why I can't find it. They are receiving a new roof on the clubhouse. They're receiving a new walk-in freezer, and they're receiving a green sprayer, and all of that is paid with a transfer in from Fund 11. So that's $305,000 right there.
Okay, so next year it should go back down to like the 260-ish, or you know what I mean, the next budget cycle.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping, obviously they got hit really hard with COVID, because not only did they have the hit on the golf course, but they had the hit on the restaurant too. You know, they should see a rebound this year, and then also they shouldn't see that amount for the capital.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say back in previous, you know, we were like $170,000 or $180,000 worth of the transfer in, and it's just a substantial increase. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions on enterprise? Okay. Trust and agency, this one is really straightforward. These are the funds that we either use to hold funds for other agencies, or we use it to hold our utility deposits or clear our payroll. So of these 5 funds, only the state judicial actually has revenue and expenditures. That is the money that we collect from municipal court for the state. We bring it in, and then we turn around at the end of the quarters and pay it out. So other than that, none of these other funds have active revenues or expenditures that go into them. So there's really not a whole lot to talk about in case anybody does want to talk about trust and agency. But otherwise, if you have any other questions on the departments that you want to get to right now, or like I said, we have slides in the future for our capital, for our gross receipts tax, and for our personnel. Okay. So our next part, we are going to go ahead and do a gross receipts tax overview and kind of talk about where we've been, where we are, and where we think we're going. So this chart here shows our FY19 actuals by month. So our FY19 actual for gross receipts tax gross was $21.9 million. In FY20, we saw an increase and we went up to $26 million in gross receipts tax. I do, as usual, need to point out August or September and November. They have large increases there because those were the 2 months where we received the payments for the correction that TRD found for the company that was not correctly paying the location on their gross receipts tax. So as always, we kind of have to point out the outliers there because they give a little bit of a bump. And then going over to FY21, as you can see, we've had a pretty good year for FY21. All points considered, none of our months have been under $2 million for our gross received. The 2 months that are highlighted in yellow there are May and June, which obviously we have not received our disbursements for May and June yet. So those are the budget numbers that we had originally projected during the last budget cycle. So as you can see right now, if we include those two numbers, we're at $25.7 million. Our projections for our FY22 are a straight 3-year average. So we're taking into account FY19, FY20, and FY21. And we have not, however, taken any sort of decrease on those numbers. Whereas last year we did our 3-year average, then we cut them by 25% in in anticipation of what was going to happen with COVID. We have not done that this year, so we still have our straight 3-year average that we've used. So this is kind of a nice line chart here that shows us kind of where we're at. As you can see, that bottom green line is FY19. FY20 is that blue line that gets kind of crazy there for those 2 months where we had correction, and then it kind of levels out and stays pretty much on that same level. FY21 is that top orange line where, above FY19, above FY20, and then kind of comes back down to the mean for the 2 months that we have projected. And then that middle black line is our FY22 projections, just kind of just riding that average in between those and sticking with the trend. But as you can see, our trend in general, it's been a little bit up, but it's pretty much been flat, hovering right around the $2 million mark for those different months. Okay, FY21. So what this is showing is this is what we budgeted at the initial budget process in March of 2020. And so this is then compares to our actuals, which we have received those months. So as you can see, every month we were able to receive more GRT than what we budgeted, which was good because we were able to balance with the $19.4 million price tag. And so the fact that we have received, or probably will receive, close to 25.7 million, it allowed us to be able to kind of build back some reserve and build back some cash balance that we were able to use on capital. So our difference so far this year from what we budgeted to what we've actually received is $6.2 million. So the FY21 reprojection by fund, I just wanted to show you guys this. This is how it is broken out to the different funds. Obviously, Fund 11 receives a great deal of it because they receive those top 4 amounts. but then it's broken out in between all the other funds based on the increments that are approved for it, all the way from Fund 42 through the 2 increments that are approved for 109. And then for FY22, this is just our projection for the $23.9 million, and just kind of shows you the breakdown of how that goes, how that flows through the funds as well by increment. Okay, this is a pie chart that is created by the Economic Development Department. They produce these charts quarterly to show the industry breakdown for the gross receipts tax that is received by municipalities. So this is for the first quarter of FY21. So this is going to be July through September. So as you can see, the big driver for our July through September gross receipts tax was retail. Then we had some smaller chunks in utilities, accommodations, food service, construction, and other services. But our big driver for those 3 months was retail. Going forward for quarter 2, so this is going to be October through December. As you can see, retail gains 1%, kind of gained a bigger chunk. And utilities, healthcare took a pretty good jump. Accommodations, food service, construction, other services is what drove that. So is there any questions on gross receipts tax? And we can go back to any of the slides that we had too. There's something else we want to discuss.
I have a question. Can you go back to that, the chart, go back a little bit? Yeah, that one right there.
This one?
Right there. So, let me make sure I'm reading this right. So obviously, we did better than projected on gross receipts, right? For this current year, the FY21. So FY22, what are we basing that on? Like, I'm trying to figure out, is it because we received it? Well, no, because it's gross receipts, so that would be it. So how are we basing our projection for FY22? I think we're just trying to be conservative with it. Is that?
Trying to be conservative. What it is we're taking 19, 20, and 21 actuals, the average of those 3 years with no increase. So in previous years, the 3-year average has been used, and we may have come to commission and said it's a 3-year average, and we believe gross receipts taxes are going to increase by a percentage or 2%. So what we're saying is it's the flat 3-year average, trying to be a little more conservative.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, because I think, you know, I would think the public would look at that and go, well, no, we did a lot better than projected. Why are we, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to clarify that, but.
Yes, we did. Well, and if you remember last year at this time, what we were looking at was a lot of unknown. When was stuff going to open back up? We had no idea that stimulus checks would be going out, that additional monies would be paid out by the state and the feds over and above what normal unemployment benefits would be. So there was a lot more money flowing in the various municipalities due to those factors. That's why you see that Evelyn's pie chart where she was showing the various quarters, why retail, you know, was so high.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what I was getting at was, are we just, I guess it was more of a, I guess it really wasn't a question of, for me, as much as it could be a question for other people. And I was just kind of, that's what I was kind of getting at was we don't expect it because the stimulus checks might be running dry now. So who knows? I don't know, maybe not, but just, you know, so people take that into consideration when looking at that. That's all.
Well, and especially because the GRT touches and affects so many funds, you know, we really do be conservative with it because it could get us in a lot of trouble really fast if we think that we're going to receive a lot more revenue than we are, because it touches so many different funds.
Right, no, I agree. I think a lot of industries. That's good. That's all I have. Thank you.
Evelyn and Brian, on like in December or January of this year, you know, after we're about halfway through, you know, just looking at the signs of the economy and where we're headed, it looks like we might take a little bit of a downturn. Do we take a look at it, you know, December, January, at our revenues, you know, our actuals, and kind of adjust from there, or?
Yeah, actually, so we take the actuals every month, and we compare to where we are in the budget. If we have, and so far in FY19, FY20, and 21, we haven't had more than 2 months in a row where our actuals have been less than what we projected. But if we do get into a situation where we start having multiple months where our actuals are less than our budget, then yeah, we do have a meeting, we get together and see if it is looking like a long-term trend, if something specific happened that we can point to, and then we adjust accordingly. In FY19, we had to do something a little bit like that towards the beginning of the fiscal year because we did have that issue with the cash balances not being calculated correctly. So we did kind of have to take a hard look at it earlier in FY19 than we normally would. But yeah, it's definitely something we track really closely and we watch all the time.
Yeah, the reason I'm at, just in my industry, you know, we're having supply issues and the costs of and the demand and stuff are way high right now. And you know, the higher the costs go, the less people can afford to do. So I do see a downturn, and like Mr. Payne mentioned, the stimulus checks. You know, we got 3 of those this fiscal year. We're not going to probably have those next year, so that may affect us considerably.
Yeah, that's the reason we've been basing it off that 3-year average and aren't proposing that there's going to be any increase in GRT. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, lean a little more towards the conservative side. That's why there's a projected. Not going to get the exact numbers. I don't have it right here. I'll have to flip to it. But we're projecting in like Fund 11 at the end of next fiscal year, assuming no changes to the budget, that there will be a little over $1.4 million left in fund balance before any of the year-end reconciliations.
I think it's always better to be proactive than reactive, so I think it's good, for sure.
Well, that's part of the reason that in this fiscal year, you didn't see staff coming to commission like you did see in other communities where they were having to do layoffs, cutting budgets. I believe the county had to adjust theirs midway. There were a lot of municipalities that had to go back and do some very serious cuts midway through their current fiscal year.
I don't know how to do that, so kudos on us. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions on GRT? Okay. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Kim Torres, the Deputy Human Resources Director, and she is going to present you her slides on the personnel budget and some of the changes that are proposed. So Kim, just let me know when you need the next slides.
Thank you, Evelyn. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, and City Manager. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting you numbers relating to the city's staffing levels and a few of the major points affecting the personnel budget. Evelyn, the next slide, please. What you're seeing in the second column of this chart is an overall decrease to the total number of actual positions as compared to the current fiscal year 21. As you may have noticed as well, the regular full-time positions has increased by 1. This is due to the change of 1 part-time employee to full-time. The average years of service for city staff is currently 7.4 years, which is a decrease from the previous year when the average years of service was 8. The voluntary turnover rate for calendar year 2020 was 15. This is a decrease of 4.6% from the previous year, which indicates we have fewer employees citywide choosing to leave. Next slide, please. This slide represents the new positions being requested for the FY22 budget. The totals you've seen on the previous screen do not include these positions. Should these 8 positions be approved, the total number of actual positions would increase to 391. Next slide, please. The first bullet on this page references the 50-cent increases previously approved for July 1, 21 and January 1st of 22 in the 4-year plan to keep them up with the minimum wage and eliminate salary compression. This factor has an approximate impact of $800,000. We do have good news on the insurance premiums, however. We were recently notified that there would not be an increase to health, dental, or vision premiums in FY22. In turn, however, it is likely that we will see an increase in 23, as this is the second fiscal year in a row without increase to premiums.
Mr. Reardon has a question.
Hey, doesn't the minimum wage go to 12 on January 1? $1.50 an hour. Went from
I can't understand what he's asking. Sorry.
minimum wage goes up to $12 an hour on January 1, not to $11.50. Not mistaken. So
Right, it
your
goes-
first bullet point you have there, you got it going from $10.50, which is I think what it is now. It goes to $12 January.
Yes, you're correct. January 1st of 22.
Okay, well, you got it as $11.50 on our slide. Is it budgeted correctly or?
Yes, that's incorrect. I'm sorry. No, January 1st, 22 is $11.50. That's correct.
Well, it goes to 12 though.
So it will go to $12 on January 1st of 23.
I thought it went on 22. It went to $12.
I can double check that, but I think it's 23. We've not yet been
Breakdown
notified.
of Senate. Oh, I'm sorry. Want to go forward one? So this is from Senate Bill. I see 437, but then I have Kim if there's an additional number over it. So this is what was approved by commission a number of years ago, and this is the breakdown of how we were getting to the $12 an hour to meet what the government or the legislature and the governor passed back in 20.
It does go into effect at 12 and in January of 23 then, not 22.
Yes, so per the website for the New Mexico Workforce Department, it's $10.50 on January 1st, 2021. It's $11.50 on January 1st, 2022, and $12 on January 1st, 2023.
That's correct.
Sorry, Kim, go ahead.
That's okay. Can you go back to, there you go, thank you. So the last point I'd like to point out on this slide is that we have not yet been notified what the mod rate is going to be for the workers' comp insurance. We're expecting the number to decrease as we'll have a couple really expensive claims fall off for this claim or for this rating period for the next fiscal year. And that's all I have. Is going to the next slide, please. And then again, this is the original slide from the presentation that was originally presented. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Two.
Evelyn, you're muted.
I am. Sorry. So this is the FY22 approved capital. These are the requests that came from departments to the city manager director meetings. Some of them were approved immediately. Some of them we requested more information. So we met a couple times on capital, and these were the final recommendations that came out of those meetings. So for the general fund, we have the HVAC replacement for the city hall. We have parking lot lighting. Again, we have the technology upgrade for the 2.5 million, which we have more slides on that. Animal control, a new roof. We've discussed the Oregon School for public safety, but they're also getting preemption devices and backup generators. And then fire is getting some lighting upgrades and some bay doors. So as you can see, Maurice prepared a really good schedule for this because you can see what is funding each of these. So out of these, Fund 69 is funding $600,000 for the public safety increases. 109 is funding $150,000 for the preemption devices, which are going to be on the streets. And then the general fund is funding the rest, which is $2.6 million for the upgrades at City Hall and for the technology upgrade. And so are there any questions on this capital for the general fund? Okay, moving on, the capital for internal services. We've already talked about before, but MIS has been approved to replace our main core switch. Fleet maintenance received some capital for several different items that they need to continue doing their work. And all of these capital requests, the $196,000, are going to be funded by the general fund. Okay. Fund 32, we talked about a little bit earlier, but we'll go through that as well. The Recreation Center is receiving a new passenger van, some equipment to the splash park and the fence that needs to be done. The Alamogordo irrigation and renovations, this is being funded half by the general fund and half by the environmental GRT because the Alameda Park irrigation system is very important to our affluent water. And so that ties in with our environmental gross receipts and trying to deal with that affluent water. They're also receiving 3 new vehicles along with a new dump truck and some utility tractors with attachments. The zoo is having some repairs to their otter exhibit, receiving light upgrades, door upgrades, and a new walk-in freezer. So out of the Fund 32 capital, $534,000 is being funded by the general fund. $376,000 is being funded by the environmental GRT, and 311,000 is being funded by some fund balance that was already existing in Fund 32. Is there any questions on Fund 32 capital? Okay. Moving on to Fund 37. Fund 37 is the fund that houses our Keep Alamogordo Beautiful grant, but it also houses our graffiti cleanup services and some of the other beautification services for the city. So they have been awarded a new graffiti eradication machine and also another vehicle to help with furthering those beautification projects. They have a substantial fund balance, so that is being paid out of the fund balance that already exists in 37. Fund 44, transportation. They are receiving their long-awaited street sweeper. You talk to anybody who works in 44, they have been waiting on that street sweeper for a long time. Another vehicle and also a new salt spreader. Street maintenance is also receiving intersection upgrades, school zone upgrades, crosswalk upgrades, streetlight replacement, and traffic battery backups, all of which are going to be funded from 109. The vehicles for street maintenance are going to be funded from 42. Weeds and drainage is receiving a requested front loader, which is going to be funded from 42. So out of the 996,000 in capital, 666,000 is coming from Fund 42, 330,000 is coming from Fund 109. Fund 81, which is our water and sewer fund. Utilities maintenance is receiving 2 new pickup trucks, a dump truck, and a backhoe. All of those will be funded from 81. The wastewater treatment plant will be receiving a new vehicle. The water filter plant is going to be receiving compliance sampling stations, a new vehicle, a new dump truck, and the upgrade to the comprehensive water master plan. Most of this will be funded from 81. However, the compliance sampling stations will be funded from 61, the comprehensive water plan from 49. So in total, 81 is receiving $1.1 million. 375,000 of it is coming from Fund 49, 250,000 is coming from Fund 61, and 511 is coming from water and sewer fund balance. For the golf course is receiving capital for a walk-in refrigerator and freezer replacement, the replacement of the golf course clubhouse roof, and also a green sprayer for the maintenance department. That total is $305,000, all of which is going to be coming from the general fund. Are there any questions on any of the approved capital for any of the funds? Okay. So now we're going to move on to, we have a couple slides here to talk about our technology upgrade. Obviously, this is something that we wanted to highlight because it is a large amount being allocated in our capital requests. So challenges that are facing all municipalities is we live in a fast and convenient world where we are used to being able to have all of our services at our fingertips, on our phones, on our tablets, on our iPads immediately. All the while, municipalities are dealing with the fact that we have systems that don't necessarily line up with a fast and convenient and innovative system. And we're also trying to provide those services on a tight budget. So talking about the specific pain points that Alamogordo is currently dealing with, we did hire a consulting firm, Boot Hill IT Services, came in, they did a review of our systems, they talked to a bunch of the different employees and identified where our pain points were in our technology. So our first one is our core public administration suite needs replacement. This is the HTE software, which is not called HTE, but that's how most people know it, HTE/Superion/Central Square. So this is the software that we use for all of our purchasing, our financial tracking, our general ledger. It's kind of the core of a lot of stuff that we do. It is almost 3 decades old at this point. It's kind of coming up on 30 years old. And so it is a dead end technology. It's a platform that runs on IBM Power 8 servers, which are extremely expensive. They're custom built, and ours are coming up within the next year and a half for replacement. And so that's not a technology that we're looking to invest more money in, as it's not a technology that's really going anywhere. It's difficult to find qualified resources to maintain this platform, especially since there are very few people, even in this general area, that can work on IBM servers. We are also losing our MIS manager. He will be retiring within the next 15 months. He is our IBM Power 8 expert. We're not going to be able to replace that information and that knowledge, because it's also something that just really isn't taught anymore. So because this technology is old, it does not integrate well with newer and emerging technologies. So as we look to do more things electronically, digitally, we look to be able to pay our bills with just a text message. This kind of technology does not integrate well with that. Some of our other pain points is our IT systems and infrastructure need to be upgraded and improved. Now we do not have a centralized network. We don't have a place where one person can go and look at the different pieces of the network. It's very, very scattered and very cobbled together. So we're looking to allow for centralized management so that we can improve maintenance and uptime, operability and collaboration potential. That's something that I think the pandemic taught a lot of us, was that there's things that we can do a different way and more collaborative, and we just didn't have the capability to do that. And of course, meet regulatory compliance for data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Obviously, this is a super important one as cybersecurity becomes more and more important every day. So why do we want to invest in this new technology? We have 5 different reasons. Speed. We obviously want to be able to do things quickly and be able to get the customer in and out, because their time is money, just like the city's time is money. So we want to be able to make things as painless as possible for people. Same thing with efficiency. The efficiency allows us to work more quickly, cut down on errors. And if we have the technology working for us, then we're not focusing on doing things that technology can do. We're working on focusing on things that need the personal touch and need the human touch, versus going out and having to manually enter things and having to do a lot of manual procedures that could be done in a more efficient way if we had technology that allowed us to automate some of it. Innovation is obviously a big one. The more we can innovate, the more attractive we are to potential employees, the more attractive we are to our customers, and the more attractive we are to retaining quality employees who are really interested in being able to use the newest technology and develop more innovative ways to do things in the municipal environment. Cost savings. Obviously, there is a large upfront cost. That's the reason why we're talking about this. But once that large upfront cost is realized, there's a lot of things that can realize the cost savings. There's certain softwares that we don't have to buy individually. There's certain hardware that we would be able to end of life that is probably taking up more electricity, that's taking up more resources, and of course, taking more of our employees' time as they're trying to go around and keep it running, versus being able to go and troubleshoot things and actually help the employees make their environment better. And always expansion, because new technology allows for us to expand capacities and services, be able to offer things that our constituents see in other areas that they're like, wow, we can do this here, why can't we do it there? So we'll be able to continue to expand access for not only the citizens, but also for our employees. So the additional factors that are driving this technology need, cybersecurity, again, continues to be a major factor in all technology decisions. There's always a concern about breaches, not only for our customers' information, our employees' information, But, we certainly just can't get into a situation where we have ransomware or malware or something where it shuts us down and we can't operate anything. And because of that, a lot of the regulatory agencies, such as the ones listed here, have very strict regulations about that. To highlight one specifically, AWIA is the American Water Infrastructure Act. That's talking about being able to safeguard our water and that no one can hack into the water control systems and do damage to very much, that they're very compartmentalized. It's something that Dave Nunley has been working very hard on. Same thing with HIPAA, which we're all aware of, protecting our health information. IPRA, protecting the ability for our citizens to request public information. CGIS is a compliance that has to do with all of our legal matters. And of course, we just don't want any sort of data breach. So this is why we're requesting the money to do the technology upgrades. We're at a point where it's not just something that's going to be a luxury. We're coming up to the point where it's going to be mandatory. And so we need to get it done in this time frame where we still have access to people who understand the way our legacy systems work. And we have access to people that can help us design new systems, help us move forward. So that is the drivers for while we're requesting that information for our technology upgrades. Is there any questions on the technology stuff? Okay. So now we're going to move on to outside agencies. The outside agencies that are budgeted in the budget numbers that we showed you earlier. We have Zero Therapy, which is the Z-Trans. That is budgeted in there at a level right now. It might have to be changed. They have received a lot of federal funding over the last year and a half, expecting to possibly receive some more, but it could also possibly go away. So they are in there. Alamogordo Commerce, Main Street Alamogordo, the Otero County Economic Development Council, and then also the arms agreement, the 3-year arms agreement that was entered into. The final arms agreement will carry over from FY21 into FY22. So that's the final $10,000 for that. Is there any questions about outside agencies?
I have one question. And it really doesn't have anything to do with anything other than I'm just curious. When does our OPDEC contract, is that I probably should know this. Is that automatic renewal or is that up for renewal? I know we discussed it in commission meeting, but when does that?
Susan, I'm sorry, Commissioner Payne, I believe it's up for renewal. I don't want to say, but I believe it's quickly, and Brian can probably tell you, but we do have to renew it every year.
That's what I thought. So I wasn't sure if that, doesn't that typically come to commission before we renew, or just automatically renew?
Usually in
doesn't.
August timeframe.
It's right before the new fiscal year. We have the 30-day period where OCDEC could back out, the city of Alamogordo could back out. If not, a letter is sent to OCDEC saying we would like to renew for an additional 1-year period. And I would have to pull the contract. I think this might be the last year. This upcoming fiscal year may be the last year for this existing contract. If it is, then during this upcoming fiscal year, we would have to go back out to the public and put out a request for proposals.
Okay, thank you.
On all of these outside agencies, what do we contribute to all of these currently? We don't have any numbers here with these. I think OPDEC, I think, is close to 80-some thousand a year, and then Main Street, what do we contribute to all of them?
OCDEC, according to contract, is 10% of the Economic Development Fund. Z-Tran, I better let Evelyn actually look up the actual number. I'll get you close, but it won't be exact.
Yeah, let me look for Z-Trans.
Yeah, all of them.
So Z-Trans right now is at 113,000. For Z-Trans, the Chamber of Commerce, 2 separate contracts. It has the promotions contract, which is paid out of Fund 16. It is budgeted at, I believe, $25,000. And then it's budgeted at $25,000, but there was an increase granted to them for another $15,000, which that $15,000 was paid out of the general fund, along with their operations contract, and their operations contract is another $25,000, and that comes out of the general fund as well. And then, yeah, sorry.
What's the additional 15,000? What's it for this year?
My understanding, and Brian will have to clarify this, was for additional promotion of the city.
Yes, that is correct.
So what is the total on everything for the chamber?
That would come to 85,000.
85,000, okay.
Typically on the outside agencies, if we do an increase, don't we usually ask the commission if we kind of want to bless that beforehand? Not just kind of hide it in budget and hopefully approve it?
This isn't a increase for next fiscal year. It's in this current year.
So this is in the FY21
This is the outside agencies. It's at the current contract levels for all these various outside agencies, with no increases for the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, so what we approved from last year.
Correct.
What about
The arms agreement would be the only, I guess you could say, exception to that, because that was originally $30,000, $10,000 a year for 3 years. We're going to be in the last year of that contract, so it's not at a full $30,000. It's only budgeted at 10. But that's also by contract.
And how much was Main
What
Street?
happened? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Main Street is $40,000.
And OPEC is a percentage of,
It's like 83, 84,000.
yeah, what is that?
It's 10% of what is collected in the economic development tax. So that's going to fluctuate dependent upon how much revenue we see in that fund.
Okay, and so we just have to go back and look and see.
Yeah, I will have that number for you just a minute.
Typically what happens is when we put the contract out for bid and the commission awards the contract, you award a 1-year contract with 4 extensions built into it. We have to send a letter saying every year we do that. We don't take it back to commission until either we want to A, term the contract, or B, it has to rebid out. That's how it all, so new contracts are typically 4-year agreements, but we do it 1 year at a time.
Right, that's why I was asking about OPEC. I couldn't remember when that was.
It was signed August 27th, 2018.
2018, okay, so yeah, it would be coming up 1 more year. We got 1 more year, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And OCTEC budgeted for FY22 is $124,571.
And then it's up for renewal? I mean, then it would have to go back out to bid?
Yes, it would have to go back out to bid.
Why is that number? You said it's 127?
124,571.
Well, you got a budget I'm looking at Fund 105, we generated 922,000 for FY 2021. So we'd had $92,000 there, because we're only allowed to go to 10%. And then FY 22, you're showing an estimated of 864, so we should only be able to do 86,000 and some change, right?
So we have some cushion built in there because we have had an issue with OCDEC not turning their invoices in before the end of the fiscal year. And we've had to go back and do revisions to pay them in the next fiscal year when they get turned in. So we did build some in there as we were trying to alleviate that from happening. Debbie is very diligent when she gets their invoices. She checks where we're at, and if it's more than 10%, she cuts it down. She only pays the 10%. But we're trying to alleviate having to come back multiple times and revise that budget so that we can get their invoices paid.
Okay, so why shouldn't maybe I'm not understanding this right, but shouldn't we be on OCDEC telling them they have to get those in before the end of the year? Or isn't that the more practical way to do it?
They have been put on notice, and they have been doing much better this fiscal year on getting their invoices in. But this is anything that is budgeted in 105, we can't use anywhere else. So
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anything not expended will go right back to fund balance.
Right. I get it.
And you're exactly right. I could reject if an invoice is turned in late. But I believe that within a relatively short period of time, staff would be directed to go ahead and pay that invoice even though it was late. I have seen this multiple times in the past, increasing what could be the compensation for OCDEC, as Evelyn explained it, makes the most sense administratively. They're not going to receive a penny more than the 10% that their contract entitles them to.
So what I know what you're getting at. I get it. I understand what you're saying. I'm just having a real issue with that. How hard is this? This can't be that difficult. I mean, generate an invoice. How hard can that be? What am I missing? Is it something? Because I mean, do we know the reason for it being so late? Because it's just not making sense to me. I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. I have some issues. I have some concerns. And so I'm just trying to figure out why.
Do they invoice monthly or quarterly, or
Yeah,
how do they do it?
It's quarterly.
They're supposed to invoice quarterly.
And what is it that they're waiting on that causes the invoice to be so late? Is there something that they're waiting on, or?
They don't get any information from us. So it's not like they're waiting for a GRT report from us or anything like that. They submit their invoices, and like I said, a lot of the times the invoices we do receive from them are greater than the 10%. And so Debbie goes and calculates the 10% that was received for the quarter. She makes the change on the invoice and cuts it down to what it should be, and she pays it. I honestly don't know what their internal structure is like that. I do know that by the end of last fiscal year, Debbie contacted them a significant amount of times, trying to get an invoice from them. She wasn't able to. And so, we close the end of the fiscal year. I mean, June 30th is June 30th. And we received, I believe, 2 quarters on like July 5th. And so what happens then is now we've paid 2 quarters of a fiscal year on another fiscal year. And now she doesn't have enough funds in that line to cover her PO for what is supposed to be for FY21. And so we've had to do that for the last 2 fiscal years. And so we were trying to kind of alleviate having to go back and do that, or having to do overrides for those invoices. But in terms of what their internal process is, I don't know.
And I am in no way blaming the city or the finance, so I hope everybody understands that. But that's a source of frustration for me, because why are we jumping? Well, okay, I'm gonna shut up. But I just don't understand why we have to jump through hoops, because I mean, if you're billing for 2 quarters at a time and you're late, then maybe you don't need the money that bad. I don't know, but I'm having a real issue with that. That's just my thoughts on it. And I'm having a real issue with that. I don't think we need to change. I get why you're doing it. I'm okay with that, because I understand why you're doing it. I'm just saying that I don't think we need to change our process. I think they need to change their process if they want our money. That's all I'm saying. So.
And I'd like to suggest that when we have to rewrite the contract, that we make sure we address all those parameters at that time.
I think it's in there. Yeah, I think it's in.
I was gonna say that we will learn that lesson. We already know that next time we write the contract, if they don't invoice us within 30 days, we won't be paying the invoice.
Exactly.
It's a lesson we've learned with this. And I will tell you that I've had meetings with their interim executive director, as well as their board president with the city manager. And we've made it very, very clear that their invoices must be on time from now on. And I believe they've been complying this year so far.
Yes.
All right.
We make sure they don't get more than 10% of what we collect. I understand that.
Absolutely. That would actually violate state law, Commissioner Reardon. You are right on with that. So that is something that we track very carefully. You're dead on. We have to be very careful with that. And I assure you that we are very careful that they will not get more than 10% of what's collected.
Yeah, that way we don't get popped in the audit or anything like that.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely about that.
I've got another quick question while we're on Fund 105 real quick. What kind of user fees do we have in Fund 105? It says we've got $24,000 budgeted, but what kind of user fee do we have for that?
That is the rental for the Family Fun Center. They are $3,000 a year.
That goes into 105?
Yeah, it goes into 105.
Okay. So we're anticipating a $24,000 worth of rentals. I know we didn't have 24,000 in FY21 due to the COVID and then being shut down, but we're anticipating there'd be 24,000 in user fees for 22.
They've indicated on social media that they're in the process of trying to reopen. So, it'll be up to the city manager when he wants to institute that rental agreement, but they have indicated on a couple different times on social media that they are looking to hire and they're looking to reopen.
They've said as soon as Etobicoke County goes turquoise, that's when they want to reopen, or that's when they will reopen.
Thank you.
So that is the end of the formal presentation. And so we are open for questions, and you have all the directors here, and any questions, comments, anything on anything in the budget, we're all here.
Just out of curiosity, Kim, was there anything that was brought up by APSOA that we were unable to comply with, that we were unable to do for them?
On the APSOA contract?
Yes.
There was, Kim was in there for part of it. She wasn't in for the whole negotiations because that lasted over a year because of COVID. So there was quite a bit back and forth. There will be at the next commission meeting, is when the changes to or the recommended changes to the APSOA contract will be coming before commission, and that will be detailed next Tuesday. Now, that we won't be going over, well, they asked for, and I'm just going to make something up at this
Oh,
point.
I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if, I hope we both came out of the negotiations satisfied that it was good for everybody.
Both sides left smiling. It was a pain smile, but smiling.
And then, Brian, I have another question. I know there's been some conversation about the city being able to cough up the 300 grand for the airport improvements. I didn't exactly understand through tonight where that 300,000 is coming from.
So right now, this is a project that's not going to happen in the next fiscal year. What we have budgeted and set aside for is what the FAA has already approved. So our airport consultant, Armstrong, is putting together a scope of work to do the preliminary engineering plan for the taxiway rehabilitation. Once we know what our match is going to be for that, we'll be coming back to commission budget resolution, and probably we'll be pulling that from Fund 69, but we'll look at the time. With an FAA grant, 90% is funded by the federal government, by the FAA, 5% by the state, the remaining 5% by the city.
Yeah, right.
The discussion that you're referring to, there has been a lot of back and forth. Commissioner, remember, staff was directed to work with the regional jet group to try and make that a reality. One of the big components of making that come to fruition is the existing taxiway. We had our engineering firm, Armstrong, do a cost difference. It was actually funded by the FAA and the state, I believe, and looked at rehabilitating or reconstructing the taxiway where it sits right now versus constructing the taxiway at the proper FAA 400-foot safety distance. There was, in round figures, about a $300,000 difference. So ultimately, the FAA and state aviation said there was not enough justification to move the project and do the proper safety distance. So the question was asked to the FAA if the city, outside of our 5% that we'd have to match for that project, which is going to be a multi-million-dollar project, regardless of which option is finally constructed, if the city was willing to put in the $300,000 difference with no match from the FAA, no match from the state, would the FAA reconsider and now fund the relocation of the taxiway? They came back and said no, and we're still, or the regional jet group and the city, we're still working to see if we can make that happen.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments, questions? I want to thank Evelyn, Kim, Brian, and I know all the directors who were involved in this. I really believe you made a great presentation to us.
And I just wanted to kind of reiterate, does anybody have anything that clarification on, anything they want to ask detail on? We can go back to the PowerPoint if we need to. Any questions on anything in the summary book or anything like that?
Evelyn, you
I
did a
think-
great job.
Thank you.
She was trained well.
If we were to see 50 or 60% increases the other way, we might have more questions, but I think it's all pretty straightforward, so.
Great job. there anything else we need to do for the business of the city? I think we'll be here the next 2 nights. Well, thank all of you, and I guess I'll entertain a motion, and I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion from Commissioner Payne, I have a second from Commissioner Wright. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner. Thank you. Have a question? There you go.